around.
Okay.
So yeah, what is my communication pattern? If I still use demand language, if I still use aggression, then I'm still going to activate retaliation, rebellion, and resistance. So even though I may not be projecting, if I don't have any skills, the way that I go about creating the change is going to create other problems.
So what I was asking Katherine is, what was her experience of, doing this work that Katherine does with resistance, reaction, retaliation, in light of what an adult would ask a child, or even another adult, because this could go to relationship issues where we don't communicate. And Katherine and I met where you, Katherine, introduced to me what you were doing. And I thought, brilliant, because you're able to do what I can't do, which are the pragmatic actions once a person has realized that they are coming, the way my languaging is, coming from a place of, I need to put my expectations on the other. So I need to place my restrictions, my personal limitations on the other. Because look, that's how I became successful. Look, that's how I coped with life. And who wants to cope with life? It would be way more fun to have a life, right? To go into life, and it's a huge adventure. And I think, I often think of your work as an adventure. My work as well, but what an adventure to explore different ways that you can communicate with a child or an adult so that they can open up and go, okay, why don't we try this, and why don't we try that, and why don't we look at, even if you're exploring a rock or an insect.
Yeah, what comes to mind is a comment I saw a couple of days ago on one of a post I'd made in social media about this thing that we're talking about, retaliation, rebellion, and resistance, the 3 R's that are activated when a person approaches a particular problem in a particular way. And the guy said something like, hey, tantrums are normal, and that's what kids do. And I thought, oh wow, yeah, there is a normal to this developmentally normal approach to a situation when a child acts out. But the part that I've been trying to open up in this person's mind with the post was that you're getting so many more tantrums than you would have to have if your communication style were different. And so with a lot of parents, for example, they just demand children do things. Adults will do that to other adults as well. And the response, whether it's the child or the adult that's experiencing someone demanding something of them, is that they go into either retaliating, rebelling, or resisting.
Clearly, even just saying, you make me feel.
Absolutely.
If I hear that response, then immediately it requires that I limit something within myself. I have to transform myself through manipulation.
Yeah.
And it's so abusive to do that so that I could meet your requirement. And we use this languaging all the time. You make me feel. Well,
Yeah.
how is it possible that someone else is responsible for the feelings that are happening in my body? You're not.
Totally. And this is such a common thing. I know we both talk about this a lot in our trainings, and this idea that someone else has the power to evoke in a mother or a father, I feel upset because you blah, blah, blah. And so it's this thing that your actions make me feel. And I talk about it as the catalyst versus the cause. Yeah, for sure you catalyzed this in me, but you didn't cause it. And, I refer back to Marshall Rosenberg so often. And Marshall would say that, when you have the exact similar situation repeat itself day after day, and what comes up for you genuinely is different, then it cannot be that the external is responsible for the internal experience. So then what's going on inside that is catalyzing what you're experiencing can't just be the catalyst. It has to be something else too.
And we talk about it the same way, or different words maybe in Breakthrough, that some catalyst or trigger is going to point in me where something, or as you say, the cause, something is resisting maybe my naturalness, maybe my God-given nature. So it lets me know, it points directly to, hey, look in you, that's where the problem is. So we often say that the catalyst is a gift, but it is a horrible experience the moment we have a catalyst. You know, that horrible experience, the loss of control, because I think we all experience a loss of control, and we just want to regain control the moment we're catalyzed, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You see it the same way, yeah? So the moment I lose control, what have I lost control of? What did I have control over? Did I have any control to begin with? Did I even have control of what is being catalyzed in me? So this kind of external view of life, right? I look on the outside to tell me who I am and what I am, and I don't explore this magnificent, actually, inner world.
Totally.
And you know, it's so cool to have seen that there's someone in Montreal. I didn't research it much, but they are doing philosophy with kids, where they're encouraging kids to ask questions. And one of the premises was exactly what you and I do, which is kids are discouraged from asking questions, right? Because when we're kids, we don't have all these assumptions about life. We don't have all these belief systems about life. So we ask these really point blank questions.
Yeah.
And the adult usually comes back with an answer that would be your 3 R's: resistance, retaliation, and rebellion, because you're not answering my question.
Yeah.
You're answering something.
But that's not what I asked, right? Is that whole sort of thing. It's like, but hold on a minute. That's not what we're like, two ships passing in the night right now. We're not even talking about the same thing. But I just want to, before we go forward, I just want to highlight this idea that, and I talk about this throughout my trainings, this idea of an external locus of causality versus an internal locus of causality. And with the internal external framework, we begin to switch, at least have the awareness that, yeah, we have been bathed in a world that has us locate the cause of my actions somewhere out there, because of this idea that we're bathed in of you make me feel, or if I buy the cool car, I'm going to feel sexy. Like something outside of me is going to be responsible for what's going on here. As a result, we are completely preoccupied with manipulating the external world in order to make ourselves feel better.
Which also manipulates us.
Which also manipulates us.
If I think the car is going to make me feel better, I'm manipulating myself, like you do with a kid, giving them a candy so they'll be quiet.
Yes.
Right? We call that often manipulation, right? To what is it, bargain with a child?
Yeah, rewards and punishments. You know,
Exactly.
It's a manipulative approach to behavioral change. They call it a behavioralist approach to parenting, where you can change someone's behavior by giving or taking something away from them. Total external locus of causality. It denies the fact that the behavior itself isn't the issue. I mean, it's an issue, but it's not the issue. It is the manifestation of an unmet need. So with my paradigm, we talk about behaviors as reflecting needs that are met inside or needs that aren't met inside. And if you can't meet your needs, your behaviors are kind of explaining that.
And also we are conditioned over a lifetime to find ways not to meet our needs.
Yes.
And it becomes this
and to meet other people's needs.
And also it becomes an addiction to meet our needs from, like you said, something external.
Yes.
If I eat this candy bar, I'll feel better.
Yes.
So you don't acknowledge the feeling and whatever's causing the feeling and unraveling it. We tend to analyze it instead.
Yes, diagnose it, analyze it, question it. I mean, we go into our heads to have a whole like thing around it. rather than to just be with it. And then, a big distinction that I work with, and I know you do too, is this idea that I'm not my feelings, but I have feelings and I can be with my feelings. And every feeling is just basically, deeply wishing to be experienced by you and allowed, not merged with it, not losing my identity and thinking I am this anger, I am this sadness, I am this, I am
And
that.
also for myself, the biggest confusion I experience when someone is even having a conversation with me or whether I'm in session is I feel I'm being disrespected, or I feel if my husband actually respected me, he would take out the garbage exactly at 8 o'clock every single Tuesday without fail. So he's not meeting my need.
Totally.
Right? This is what, since when the last time I checked, taking out the garbage is not a feeling.
Yeah, of course not.
And also, if I check inside, being disrespected is not a feeling. Mm-hmm. So, we do use in colloquial terms that I feel disrespected. I understand that. Mm. But at the same time, I don't know what feeling is associated with your belief that you've been disrespected, right? So what is the feeling? For me, ultimately it's contraction or expansion. Even if I feel nausea, there are contractions and expansions going on in me. If I'm with a bunch of people who are difficult, I might find my body contracting. If I'm with a bunch of people who are having some fun and we're laughing, I could feel my body expanding. Otherwise, I don't see any other feelings that I have. They're descriptions of combinations.
Yeah. And, again, we're so aligned in that really the distinction in my own experience of myself is being aware when I want to use my thoughts to describe my experience rather than explaining by really connecting to, oh, the word for this really is anguish. I'm experiencing anguish, or I'm experiencing sadness or grief or whatever that experience is.
Well, I want to share a funny story with you. I woke up one morning and I felt a kind of ball just at the base of my my sternum. And immediately the thought flashed in my mind, oh, that's anxiety. And then I went, wait a minute. How do I know it's anxiety? It's a name I'm calling this thing. And the moment I did that, all in the same moment, the ball disappeared and I couldn't stop laughing. I just thought it was the funniest thing that I had given a name to something. And the moment I gave it a name, it was sitting there. The moment I went, wait a minute, what name is this? What are we talking about here? And I laughed for about 20 minutes.
That's a really, interesting example in, sort of the vernacular. We say name it to tame it. And there is a sense of when you do name something, if you get it spot on, there's this instant sense of release. And if you don't get it spot on, then you can experience that there's no shift.
Or if you realize that maybe it doesn't have that name.
If it doesn't have the name, then it doesn't move. And when you acknowledge, hold on a minute, it's like poof, it's gone.
Yeah, because the moment I said, no, it's not anxiety.
Right.
I don't know its name. It's a feeling I'm having. Who knows what's moving? It could have been gas.
Precisely.
And I called it anxiety. And the moment I said, wait a minute, no name.
Yes.
It was gone.
Yes.
So I couldn't stop
and what I'm so conscious of is that, there's self in presence. When there's self in presence, there's a sense of being bigger than what's bugging you. There's a sense of there's something in me. And I wonder what that something is. And you're truly just curious, gosh, there's this something, it's right here, it's at the base of my sternum. And I'm going to be with it. I'm going to sense into it. I'm going to just kind of be like curious about it. And there's all of a sudden this spaciousness between me being with this something versus me thinking I am this something. And that piece of identification with the somethings in us is
The
so
constant
interrelated.
naming, the constant naming of things too.
Yes, the constant naming of things. Exactly.
One of my favorite stories is when I was really, really little. I think it was about 3 or 4, and I was touching my grandmother's head and touching her shoulders, and she said, "Oh my, Terryann, every time you touch me, you have such healing hands."
Mm,
And I went, "Oh, they have a name for that."
mm,
Because it was the first time, almost like Helen Keller recognizing there was a name for water. I
mm,
said, "Oh, there's a name for it."
mm,
But prior to that, I had no name. I was just in the experience. And I
mm.
can remember as clearly as a bell. And then how many um, assumptions and labels and presumptions and suppositions we place on things because we've accumulated all these concepts.
Mm.
So in my work, the biggest thing we do is deconstruct the
Yes.
mind so we can see what we've assumed. And then you come back to presence.
Yes.
Once you're here and you're within, there's nothing wrong ever.
Yeah.
You're completely perfect. Even with all your warts and all your imperfections, you realize, well, I'm just a human being, right? Because ultimately.
So it's so true. So in the coaching of, communication, this whole thing around observation without evaluation. So the observation without evaluation, Krishnamurti said, was the highest form of human intelligence. It's the capacity to just be the observer without the diagnosis, the analysis, the judgment, whether it's the positive or the negative judgment words, just stripping all of it out of our language so that we're really just the observers of, oh, there's a broken glass on the floor. Yeah, I think I'll sweep that up.
That's a really good imagery, because the moment you say that, I think of all the parents that I've worked with that are triggered because the child has tried once again, to pour that glass of milk and they've spilt it on the floor and the parent explodes, when it's just, well, they're exploring. It's like a toy. It's like let them figure it out. What's the big deal?
We have a broken glass on the floor.
Broken glass.
I think I'll sweep that up.
Right, it gets closer and closer to that imagery of, or that expression. Don't cry over spilled milk, for goodness sakes, right?
That's so good. That's so good. Oh, I love it. We could do that as a breakthrough.
But we do cry over spilled milk because it is quite powerful the moment we're catalyzed. But realizing that, you use the terminology of external focus.
Oh, external locus of causality.
The external locus of causality.
Yes.
I'll just keep it simple. Whatever's going on with me, I am going to see it in my world around me. So if I see anger in my world around me, if I see wars in my world around me, if I see disharmony in my world around me, that means that's what's happening inside me. From the time I was really young, I always thought, hey, if I clear up my own internal conflict, I stop seeing the conflict outside myself. I can't see it anymore. So it's every conflict that we see because we have this internal conflict.
Yeah, it's that whole thing of, I think I'm just going to move schools, or I think I'm going to just move neighborhoods, or I think I'm going to just, people keep moving and moving and moving. And there's this, and, not to say I haven't done this myself, that, it is part of the human condition, that it's something around, oh, it's the school, it's the neighborhood, it's the neighbor, it's the bit, and I just have to keep moving. And then you move and you recreate the entire situation all over again and over again and over again and over again. And finally, maybe there's this realization of, oh my God, I take me everywhere. And it seems like no matter where I go, I seem to just recreate the same darn thing. I wonder if I have
what the common denominator is, right? Or my favorite is, if a gal comes in and says, all men are the same, I just date all these men and they're all the same. And I'm like, yeah, but who's the common denominator?
Yeah.
You're the one who's the same. I don't see men the way you do. And I can bring you 100 other people who don't see men the way you do.
Yeah.
But you see men because that is your reflection. That's how you see them. You need to go
So
here.
It's walking back to these, I talk about the man in the mirror. I even play, Michael Jackson in one of my videos in my training program. And I have, I don't know where I saw it, but this idea that, you put something, let me put something that's a little more colorful so you can see the reflection, where I see this thing, and I keep trying to like, get it out of my reflection, right? And I'm over here, trying to like do this. And it never, occurs to me until some stage in my development where I go, oh, it's over here. And if I take it away, it's gone over there. And this is, of course, what we're talking about, that it's something in me that I'm not being with in a way that it feels acknowledged, seen, and heard within me. And so I just keep pushing it out onto my outer landscape so that it's really big in front of me. And then it's like I'm wrestling with shadows.
And it really shows us how little compassion we have for ourselves.
Yeah.
It's so minute. We just have none. We're so caught up in all of the expectations we have for ourselves, and they're so strong, and we project them out in the world. We want our kids to behave the same way we're behaving. We want our partner to behave the same way, and they're not going to, because not everyone's going to feel the same way every single day. And we're not robots, we're human. And
and what comes to mind as you're saying this is this passive aggressive. People talk about, oh, so-and-so so passive aggressive, or people might say about, me, or I'm so passive aggressive. Not really me. I'm pretty straightforward, up straight, aggressive, or assertive, but I try to be assertive, but I recognize sometimes when I'm out of control, it comes off as aggression. And so when we have this experience of wanting to change this thing out here without recognizing this idea, then we really become maniacal about trying to get all of the things and people around us to be, doing the right stuff, so that, as a mom or a dad, they will be safe in the world, and they'll, continue to have a solid future in front of them. And there are all kinds of great justifications for what we do and why we do it.
Or maybe lousy.
Maybe not great justification for ourselves. I think we have great justification for what we're doing. At least we convince ourselves that
or
it's
we've
necessary.
got such an aggressive attitude because those justifications make the individual feel safe. If I think you need to behave in a certain way, it's for my own safety.
Yeah,
but it might not be safe
protest
for
too much.
you.
So this is where that methinks he doth protest too much thing comes in from Shakespeare, where it's sort of like, well, hold on a minute. If you really, if you really felt that way, why are we still talking about this? Like, you could have just made your point and just, that was it, and the going on and on and on. I used to say to my mother, my God, Mom, hit me. This is death by lecture. Like, you're killing me over here. You know what I mean? This is death by lecture. And now with this kind of framework that we talk about, I look at it and I think, oh, she was trying to convince herself.
Yes, it's all self-doubt and insecurity, and we have no idea. We build a case for ourselves, right? Mm-hmm. I have all the justifications, excuses, evidence, everything for why the other has behaved in a certain way and should change, and yet we don't look back at ourselves. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what we need to do, is just turn that inward, to shine the light inward, so we can see, hey, there are nooks and crannies here that feel unsafe. We need to meet our own safety requirements, not external. You've got to make me feel safe, especially in this time, right? It's all about everybody else. I'm going to make myself feel safe. I'm going to try to keep you safe, but now I got to get everybody else to do it too. And look how easily we all did it, right? And yet,
yeah, I'm just, as we're talking, I'm just thinking about the, what is it? Is it, I don't know what the right word is. Is it my agreement that I allowed at an unconscious level to be part of this, whatever the contract was and whatever the relationship was, that I'll show up and let you be you doing this, and then I'll play this role. And then we'll do this until, the end of time, or we'll do this until there's an aha in me. And there's a moment of an aha that happens. And there's so many different relationships I can look back on within my own lifespan, where I could see the wash and repeat I could see myself, and there are certain relationships I'm looking at over the course where I go, yeah, it kept showing up over and over again in the same way. And then something broke the pattern. And when that happened, the shift in the dynamic changed completely.
It reminds me of an example I used to give 20 years ago. Sometimes something small could catalyze us to realize, to have that aha moment within.
Yeah.
Or we may need to feel someone's boot at the back of our head, pushing down on the sidewalk and our teeth breaking to finally go, oh, maybe this is about me. And maybe I need to stop doing what I'm doing. Right? Sometimes we need such a forceful hit, especially, one of the things I've noticed is that over the years, I had a lot, like one overreaction get triggered over and over again, and I just wanted to work through each one of them. Then I had space. All of a sudden, I wasn't triggered. I went, wow, what a nice reprieve. But then when I was triggered the next time, it wasn't a million of them like I had had previously, but the trigger was stronger. So I really wondered why. Why would the trigger be stronger? Well, we're so good at coping that if we just got a little blip, we'd go, oh, that was nothing. Maybe I was just tired. Then years go on, keep doing the work. And now any little blip, and I would turn around and go, oh, I must be triggered. Now I had to look at it differently and realize, oh, maybe it's just because I am tired and I haven't looked at that. So it's been so fascinating having to watch, or being in this process of watching increased flexibility of the mind, right? I'm sure you've noticed it, right? You're more.
Yeah, well, as you're talking, I'm thinking to myself, that's just so funny because, it's another mindset around, okay, no, it's not this person outside. This is about me. And so it's another form of manipulation. I need to just keep working on me and working on me and working on me and working on me and working on me. So a story I like to tell is we had a helper for 7 years who, if I asked her to do the kitchen cleanup before the yard, she would slam cupboards all day long. And I would tiptoe around the house. We all tiptoed around her. And she was definitely like the alpha dog in the house, the helper. And so it was so funny. Finally, after doing 400 breakthroughs, I think I finally just said to her, look, I think we're just oil and water. And I don't know what else to do. I've done every sort of breakthrough I can around this, and I'm going to have to let you go. I'll write you a great letter of recommendation, so forth and so on. So she left and she got another job. And I heard through the grapevine that she was there for a week and she'd gotten fired. And then she had another job and she was there for a week and she'd gotten fired again. She got fired by one employer after another. Boom, boom, boom. Clearly people who were not consumed with the idea of it's in me, I have to fix myself. They just looked at her and knew that this was totally inappropriate. And they just fired her over and over again. And I thought, wow, I denied her an opportunity to see that there was something about the way that she was being that was not okay by continually making it about me.
That's a really beautiful story, by the way. Beautiful. I really honor that because I've done it so many times with so many different relationships. It must be me. It must be me. It must be me. Until finally you realize, oh, no, it's not. It's the other. I had a friendship for so many years and I always came back to it. Got to do my work before I can reconnect with her appropriately. And one day I woke up, and the moment I did, so many people rallied around to get me to be her friend again. And when they came to talk to me, I can't do it anymore. I can't stand being manipulated anymore. And they turned around and said, she manipulates? I go, yes, I do. We thought you had no clue. Well, I said, I didn't really. It just got so big. And listening to everyone's experience of her, I went, oh my God, I've been blaming myself when everyone's having the exact same experience.
Mm.
And then that goes off to, a whole other subject we won't get too much into because it's huge. But, some relationships, it takes a long time to heal.
Mm.
Like if someone dies, we have our mourning period, but through the years, we may have tears when someone
Mm.
dies. We may have, something awful, or you have a traumatic experience in your life and you think, oh, I'm just going to do one thing for it to heal. No, you might need to wait for the next trigger before you can work with it. That's often what I look at is, hey, I don't need to do any work unless a trigger comes up. Unless I'm catalyzed. Otherwise, just go have fun.
Mm-hmm.
Live your life, enjoy it. Here it is. It's a nice
Mm-hmm.
place to be. And when I'm triggered, okay, then I'll do it. Because oftentimes people are looking, when they come for a breakthrough session, they'll often look for something to work with. And I say, no, we don't look for something to work with. You just cancel the appointment if you have nothing to work with. This is not about forcing something. Have a good time. Go off. What are you going to do sitting here looking at things? Go, play in the snow or.
Yeah, something will get catalyzed eventually.
It will. Who needs to look for it? When people say they're going to look for it, I'm like, what?
Yeah.
You don't need to look for it. It'll come up. You'll know exactly when. I even worked with a couple of people who said, so what do we do about setting up a next appointment? I'm like, when you're catalyzed, call me.
Yeah.
There's no need to set anything up. And they said, what? But don't we continue? I'm like, no, live your life. Have a good time. And when you're catalyzed, come back. And I can't tell you how many people said, wow, that's such a relief to hear.
Yeah. Yeah. When there's something to work with, we work with it. There's not like some sort of like set appointment. And, what was coming up for me as you were talking about it, and kind of harks back to what we were saying earlier, was that this idea of the conflict is within me, that there's a conflict within me. I have different, conflicting beliefs. And that's giving rise to my anguish, as opposed to there's something out there that I need to change. And that, I don't know what would help in terms of, an approach to facilitate that understanding. I find that with, a lot of the parents that I work with, it's not always accessible, that awareness. It's not always accessible that there's something, it's about some conflicting belief within me that's giving rise to this experience I'm having, as opposed to the focus on the external.
Right, because I think what happens with us as an individual, but also as through our work, as we understand one layer of the work and we deepen and deepen, it's like the very basic concepts rise up and they're almost worse than they were at the beginning. So, when I look at working with I worked with it 1995, I'd sit around and go, that's not a feeling as far as I know. Your husband taking out the garbage is not a feeling. So what is the feeling? That's how many years now? What is it? 2021.
Yeah.
Subtraction for me. That's a huge number of years. And now this past 2 months as the change into 2021, and I feel like Mercury in retrograde had part of it. It's like it's come into my face more powerfully than it did in 1995. And I thought, what's going on? And it triggered me. And I thought, well, what's going on? And I thought, well, now we're really deepening this understanding. It's like it's always going deeper and deeper.
Yeah,
and
the spiral staircase. I know I had an experience with an astrologer that I've been seeing for a couple of decades, and
so you're talking about Phyllis Virak, right?
Yeah, of course I'm talking about Phyllis. And it was literally like 30 something years ago. I can remember talking to Phyllis about my relationship with my mother, which, was very codependent, and there was enmeshment, and it was complicated and difficult. It was
codependencies.
Yeah, everything was all of it, the big soup. And then
sorry to say you're not novel.
Yeah. Mothers and Daughters, the books that have been written about it. Oh my God.
Oh my God.
So yeah, so then then I noticed it was probably 20 years later. It was about 10 years ago when my mother died, and it was before she passed, and I was on with Phyllis again. And I was like, oh my God, Phyllis, I can't believe all this same stuff. I talked to you about this 20 years ago. And she just laughed and she said, yeah, Katherine, it always is spiraling and you're reconnecting with it. Obviously, you're not the same person, but you know, these layers are so deep around the entanglements and the enmeshments and this violation of self, if you will, that happens
one of the
growing up.
things that I often say for myself, thank God it's only one thing.
Yeah.
That I keep coming back to, you know, at least the rest is working really nicely, but that one thing keeps rotating. Whereas I often hear people say, really, it's the same thing, I'm still dealing with it? Well, what do you want to deal with? Do you want to grab onto cancer? Do you want to grab onto, let's say the next issue will be you lose all your money and you're living on the street? No, here's your issue. Keep working it through. By the time you get to the end, it'll be done. But who wants to move on to a new one? I sure as heck don't.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great way of looking at it. We might as well just be tangling with one, you know, one lion, as opposed to, you know, I'll take this lion over that one, you know, and I'll keep refining my understanding of codependency, my understanding of, you know, over responsibility, being responsible for someone else's feelings, because we're back to this feeling thing. You know, there's the thread. That's why I'm sure it popped into my mind, was that I guess a huge pattern that I find is just, you know, to pathologize is ridiculous. It is the human condition, that there is this family structure that exists that is somehow so popular. And I think about all those years in Asia where, you know, filial piety and children being a reflection of the family, and they either bring honor or disgrace. And this child that grows up in this world feeling this pressure to either bring honor or disgrace and for some children, it's unbearable. And as a result, I don't know if it's a connection, complete correlation, but you know, the highest suicide rate among young women in the world is in Hong Kong. And it's very high also in Japan and in Korea and in China. And there's something in that particular part of the world that really stresses this idea of your children are a reflection of you, and they bring honor or disgrace. And so children who may not excel in school, where a lot of emphasis is put on grades and getting into the right schools and the right programs, and, you know, basically creating bragging rights for the parents, the child feels so overwhelmed by the disappointment that this person is saying that they're responsible for making them okay, that they just say, I'm offing myself.
Oh, I've worked with someone who did kill himself. He just couldn't get through the belief systems. It was tragic to watch. And me personally, if my parents would have done that, I probably would have been one of those people. There was no way I wanted to continue. If my conflicts with myself couldn't be unraveled, resolved, to be able to have my own adventure, which is often, you know, we do matrix work as well, which you've experienced too, which, you know, helps us see that, you know, the healthy family dynamic is that the parents are always supporting the child, but the child doesn't tell the parents how to do it. Right. So there's no codependency. The child's always looking towards their life. They don't have to look back, right? At, you know, I'm a reflection of the family. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I'm having my adventure and my parents are behind me, supporting me 100% to go off, you know, like the eagle up in the arete. When the little chickadees are ready to go, the mama has to push them out, whether they can fly or not. Otherwise, they're not going to survive.
It's such, I mean, I'm really loving this conversation. It's such a powerful thing around separation and individuation, allowing a child to separate, individuate, have their own self. And, you know, I did a whole TED talk around this idea of being affected by my mother. And, and Alice Miller, as you know, is like one of my heroes. And it's just the fact that she was able to articulate this phenomenon of feeling cathected is the word, where the caregiver themselves have been narcissistically deprived as a child. They themselves were never given a reflection about their separate self, so that they felt like, yeah, oh, that's what that is, that's me, whatever me is. So instead of having a sense of that's me, it was more or less a sense of, you should feel this way and you should be doing these things. And it was like, oh, denying self to please the other. And as a child, of course, all of this happens under the radar. And the number one thing you're doing is surviving your upbringing. And the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So many of, the mothers are doing their parenting from a place of unconsciousness. It's not awareness within them. It just is where they are in their consciousness. And so, what is that expression? Forgive them, Lord, they don't know what they do. Like, it just is what it is. And so, of course, you knew my mother a little bit. And I loved and adored this woman. And Phyllis used to say, she's your teacher. And I would say, of course, yeah, she was a teacher for me, like crazy. I would not do what I do if it weren't for my mother.
I would say, I say the same thing. And, in the recent years, I was I've been quite lucky, I think, that my mother is still alive and will probably live a really long time. But all the triggers that I had around her and all the ways I tried to please her and always feeling I wasn't giving her enough and, accusing her of being the one who's so needy. And it was a transition about a decade ago where I realized she doesn't want me to do any of this. She's just fine. And I started seeing the beauty again, as I did when I was a kid, because my mom used to come in when we were kids and go, "Good morning, breakfast lovers. Good morning, sunshine." And recently there's just been this huge opening again of that, that mom who is happy and there. And, there were things that were obviously codependent for her and her mother, etc. So that whole developmental process. But doing this work, knowing you and how much we've worked together and doing breakthrough, and my teacher, Esther Veldheim, who developed the breakthrough system, she always says, it's amazing we ever survived childhood. And, when she said that, I thought, yeah, it's amazing we get out alive. We certainly don't get out unscathed. We get out alive. It's pretty amazing. And it's pretty amazing that after that whole experience of all of the projections of the parents and the external world is the one that's going to change whatever's going on inside and make my feelings better, etc. That we can actually do this work and come out the other end and go, wow, my relationship with my mom is completely different. My
Isn't that amazing?
with my dad is completely different. I don't feel that tug and pull anymore, which is so powerful. For a while I thought, I'm probably going to die and still have this codependency, and here it's happening. So it's very powerful what we do.
Well, yeah, it's amazing. And sometimes you do it while they're alive, and sometimes you do it later. And I just think about when my father passed, that it was so easy. And, I reflect back and I think, wow, it was really just like turning a page one day, physically there, next day gone, but yet the relationship was pretty conflict free. And so, I still feel his, presence in me, and that, like, Dad was we just had such a conflict-free relationship. And so the experience of his transition was so radically different with Mom. It was so completely, like years of work that got to be catalyzed by the transition, because my job was to keep her alive. And so, that my God.
And-
I am your oxygen tank. I'm here,
yes,
everything's going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine. I've arrived. It's okay, everybody. I'm the oxygen tank, and I am going to keep her alive. She finally said to, I think it was the hospice nurse, you got to get her out of here. Somebody help her. Yeah, because, she learned her lessons way too well, and she's going to keep me alive forever, even though I need to go now. Wow.
Crazy, right?
Yeah, it's so crazy. So crazy.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I had so many little thoughts while you were talking. When you mentioned Alice Miller, she has this phrase that always sticks with me, that if a mother respects herself, then she'll respect her son, and her son can do nothing but respect himself, and then he's going to respect others. Then I went back to Polonius talking to Laertes, and he says, "To thine, above all, to thine own self be true, and as day follows night, thou canst be false to any man." And I thought, wow, there we go. We've got the modern day Alice Miller version. And then we've also got the Shakespeare said it ages ago.
Yeah.
Just being honest. And that's where we come to in this work, right? First, you have to have that dedication, let's say, or that that responsibility towards yourself, that you will be honest. And when I think back of what we've been talking about, and we go to the ideas of somebody else making me feel, or any of the subjects, the first step is I have to be honest with myself. And I have to be honest with my actions. So one of my favorite stories is when I was 15, I sat down and I was writing all my conflicts out, and all my notebooks were covered with all this conflict, and if I just see the conflict, I'll be able to resolve it. And I couldn't always get there. But one day I thought, you know what? The buck stops here with me, especially with my mom. It stops with me. I'm the one who needs to look at myself and take responsibility. So we had an argument, and I actually stood up and said, I was 15. Mom, I take full responsibility for acting like a spoiled brat. I take full responsibility for acting obnoxiously, and whatever other list of things that I noticed she was saying about me. And I looked at myself and I went, yeah, that's exactly what my behavior looks like. I am going to take responsibility right now. But a little tricky thing I was doing, and I didn't realize it till she turned around and said to me, yes, you are. You've already picked up what I was trying to do.
I knew that was coming.
You knew it was coming because, I was taking responsibility, but that codependency was still there, and the stickiness that said, if I do this, then I'm going to help my mother take responsibility, and then we're going to get to the next step of our conversation. Instead, she just went, yes, you are. And I went, oh, she's really showing me the buck stops here with me. It's like, you do it, hun. I don't have a problem. You're the one who has a problem with this. And I thought, she's right. It's me.
It's so funny because I had a similar conversation. I remember saying, I used to bring my whole program home from Hong Kong to Colorado summer after summer after summer. And I would want to set it up, do the show, get mom involved, it was like, I was so excited. We're going to transform our relationship. You're going to learn all these skills about, nonviolent communication and assertive versus aggressive and name calling and judgment. And we're just going to dig in. And summer after summer, she would say to me, there's nothing wrong with my communication. I was like, oh my God. I do remember saying to her, Mom, I just feel like it would be better if we could just do this together. I have no interest. Yeah, of course you don't.
I've got to heal the mother so I could heal myself. Meanwhile, it's like, no, stop it. heal
Yeah.
myself, and everything will be fine. If they're fine with themselves, it kind of goes back to people saying, okay, let's set up more sessions. I'm like, no, just wait till you're triggered. Or
Yeah.
if we set a session, you really want to, and you're not triggered, cancel. Like, I'm
Yeah.
not going to sit with you trying to.
Right. But I mean, it's that amazing sense of realizing, of course, and with many years between that event and today, that, that the very act of trying to get them involved to change their behavior is also just another like deeper level of the codependency of the healing, heal thy mother and you'll be fine thing.
And how clear it becomes that we've blamed the parent for the codependency.
Yeah.
Right. That's the external focus, right? I look outside and go, well, you're the one who did it. You're the one who created it in me. So I'm going to fix it in myself, but you got to do it too. Meanwhile, it's like, no, whether it was created or not by her or, 15 generations back doesn't make a difference. You're the only one who needs to stop. And how I can't tell you how many times I was embarrassed inside myself when she would turn around and just go, no. And I'd be really, really embarrassed. Like, oh, I'm doing the exact thing I don't want her to do. And I'm drawing her into it, and I'm arguing about it. I'm encouraging it, and I'm finding justifications and excuses till finally I went, stop. It took me till my late 50s.
Yeah, well, we've been 50's been good to us because a lot of seasoning, I guess, a lot of marinating and seasoning got to happen so that we could finally come to this
got the
point.
Meat pounding.
Yeah, exactly. We got, we got seasoned and all the rest of it, so that it was sort of like, yes, some juices are flowing as a result of, this great marination process. But something I want to go back to that you said earlier about Alice Miller, and what popped into my head was that she had said, if the child had had just one person who had acknowledged the crazy that was going on, that was able to be a stand for what their experience was, that this wasn't good parenting, that this wasn't about socializing a child, that this was just abuse, straight up child abuse, that it doesn't require more than one person to be able to acknowledge and hold that, connection for the child to realize they're not crazy.
Well, it's almost as though the moment you have someone who sees your experience, acknowledges it, all of a sudden you become anchored.
Yes.
For me, when someone acknowledged, yes, I get it, I became anchored. When I had somebody watching, let's say my mom and I argue, and they started saying, but you don't understand your mother, or you don't understand.
Yes.
It would just unanchor. Because now you've got a third person engaging in who's right and wrong and trying to explain what the other one's saying. And I'd be like, no, it's not about the explaining. It's not going to help. But the moment someone says, I get exactly your experience, which is what you do in your work with kids, right?
Yeah.
You use language that communicates exactly what the child is saying. And the moment they feel it's like, okay, now I can be anchored. Now we can have a conversation.
Yeah, it's so funny. I had a client, a 10-year-old client the other day, and they were talking about how it's hard to talk about my feelings, she says, especially when they're dismissed. And so she says,
I'm gonna cry a little bit. So
yeah, especially when they're dismissed. And so, I just go to my room because nobody understands me.
Yeah. Or even understanding I have confusion with that word, because you've got to understand me. I don't even understand myself. So how are you going to understand me? But you can acknowledge my feeling.
Absolutely.
You can, I can say, I feel, stressed, and that's acknowledged. And let's especially if you have a parent around, your child says feel stressed, which I have so many great parents who go, my child feels stressed. What are some of the practical things we can do for that stressed child? It's like, okay, you're on a great pathway. And then there's the other pendulum swing. They feel stressed and the parent freaks out, so it reinforces the stress. So there's always a little bit of a mix-up.
Such a good point, and I had another client who's a young man in his early 20s said, if I even say that, I'm bummed out, it's like I set a bomb off in the living room and everybody goes crazy trying to make everything okay. It's hilarious. It's like, okay, this person is having a feeling. They're feeling bummed.
Yeah, I was working
to do anything about it.
Yeah, I was working with a young man who, had all this rage going on in his body. He's in his teen years. And I said, so what's the problem? You're a teenager, you got hormones running through your body. Rage would be absolutely, necessary for the body to develop, etc. And the moment he heard that, he went, oh. And I said, I'll work with anything you want to work with. But first of all, to realize it's natural that, and you're a man, you're going to have tons of rage going through your body. Your bones are growing. Is there a problem? Actually, no. I just needed someone to recognize that was going on and not try to stop it. Because the more somebody would try to stop and prevent or excuse or say, don't do this or don't do that, he would become more enraged inside.
Absolutely.
Right? So, I mean, I don't recommend running around doing that technique on everyone. That's part of my work, but in that specific instance.
Yeah, I think that, but when you say it again, I'm thinking about this couple of kids that are in their early 20s. And I think to myself, a lot of what's happening is, again, back to this idea that someone outside needs to make someone else's experience different. And, and that the someones that feel like they need to make these kids feel differently or whatever, act differently, behave differently toward each other. There's this sense of, and I was talking about this the other day, where we disempower people. We disempower people when we get involved in trying to make it better. Because there's that embedded assumption that they can't do it themselves. I'm here, thank God, everything will be better now.
It just becomes, this is the way you cope. And then those coping mechanisms that are supposed to be a way to deal with the world, that's the definition we usually use. Well, I'm coping, which means I'm dealing with something. But if you look around, that's not the way we use coping mechanisms. We use coping mechanisms to suppress something. No, we want to deal with it. You feel angry? Feel angry. Let's see what happens. Let's see what you need. What will come next? I don't know what you need to do next. But first you need to have the experience. Stop trying to put, all these mental parameters and assumptions on top of your anger, because we know the emotions are natural. They're moving around the body. When I think of a critical time in life, I'm not going to tell you where it is because people should research it, but it is in Canada.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Fascinating.
Yeah.
But I mean, I guess ultimately we've gotten to this idea that there is a sense of self and, or there isn't a sense of self because there is no sense of separation and individuation that happened. So, I have the classic conversation with your mother in my head. What's your favorite flavor of ice cream? Well, I don't know. What's yours? Right. It's that like, I really had no sense of myself because it was always about my awareness of others in the room. And I became really good at understanding what they liked, how they felt, what was going on for them, because I was trained to have an external locus of causality. I was trained to be like all over this room and know what was going on in the people around me so that I could be that shadow dancer, changing self to be sure that everything around me stayed safe. Because I learned that if they got fired up because I pushed their buttons by challenging something that they said or did, that it would erupt in them and make my world unsafe. So to stay safe in this world, I
then she
had
gave
to
birth-
manipulate myself.
Exactly. Then she gave birth to a daughter who turned around and said, "Stop it." So she couldn't figure out how to make me happy. Because every time she would try to make me happy, I would explode. Because
Yeah, it's usually the child trying to make her happy, right? So the child's making the parent happy, making the parent happy, making the parent happy. The parent is saying, stop trying to, what's wrong with me being sad? And, why are you always trying to make me happy?
Exactly.
And it's sort of like, well, there's something that you're not acknowledging here, is that you've been putting out the bat wings to say, make me happy all my life. And now you're saying to me, what, it's not my job to make you happy. Come on. That's my job. You made that my job.
Exactly. Fascinating. That's always wonderful to talk to you, Katherine.
It is always wonderful. Yeah, it is so fun. It's like a good tennis match. Yeah.
Places to go. We'll have to make some more so we
yes,
can
totally
enrich others with all of our crazy experiences. But I do want to reiterate that maybe just take identification a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
When we're identified with something, it becomes our limitation. And then we end up trying to control it. So we try to control the identity we reject, and the identity that we accept ends up controlling us. So ultimately, I think our work is to completely see those two identities, and they're always the opposite: good, bad, right, wrong, this, that, the other thing. As soon as we recognize we aren't either of them, that's when we can drop the identity and there's a lot of freedom. Otherwise, we're always fighting about it. Like my story about thin girl and fat girl, two strong identities. So I identify with fat girl, and I trapped fat girl in a cage, and I didn't feed her anything when I got really thin. So then I was thin girl, and fat girl was trapped in there. She was no more. She was starving. She was sitting in her own feces, chained in a lock. And then one day I wasn't paying attention, and she escaped and shoved my head into a cake, and then I just gained all the weight back. So no matter what, that the other identity, it's almost like attached a rubber band or the two faces of a coin. You can't escape the other. The two identities are always pushing and pulling. That's the famous expression, walking the razor's edge between the tension of opposites. We're always in this opposition. And what's really cool to really think about, this is so great, is that the mind cannot understand paradox. I can, but my mind doesn't understand it. So maybe I love that, because it helps me often understand when you and I are doing our work, how people jump from one side to the other. Because when you're in your mind and you see the paradox, you can only disagree with the other. No, this is only the way it is, because we can't hold the two. There's only when I look at it going, look at those two going on in my head. They're jumping back and forth. But the mind, if you're in there, there's no way. So that really helps me understand why, in any given moment, someone loses the grasp on you make me feel, because they can't hold the paradox of, no, you're the one who's doing the feeling, not them. If it snows out, the snow isn't making me feel a certain way, because somebody could be outside in the snow in a t-shirt and shorts and be warm. Another person can go outside and go, it's minus 18, it's freezing, I need to bundle up. But we don't turn around and say the snow is making me feel this way, that my temperature is going down. For you, you're just fine in the snow, you can hang out. So then I go take a pragmatic action, which is your domain in many ways. Take the pragmatic action of just put your coat on. You don't run around screaming at the sky to stop snowing, and you don't scream at the gods of temperature control that you need to adjust the temperature control. Right? But that's what we're doing because we think this is what I've heard as many answers to that example. They'll say, but people know better.
Mm.
Really? Yeah,
Mm.
that's a good one. Do we know better? Do we know anything? Do we even know about ourselves?
Mm.
Right? If you go back to sexuality, who cares what sex you are? Don't give a damn. But if you're struggling, if you're identified with something and you're trying to blame everybody else, well, now you don't have an idea of what your own sexuality is.
Yeah.
Right?
So, I mean, this is really an incredible door to open. Of course, it's a big door to go through.
It's huge.
And I would say that, this first thing that comes up for me in listening to you that I think took me many years to actually fully grasp is that I am not the paradox. I am not identified with one or the other. And that I that, that you speak so strongly from is the self, that's present to it all, that can see all of it, but isn't identified with it. And, anybody who may in the future be listening to this, that part right there, I think, this idea of a self being bigger than any of that, there's some work I do where we talk about getting bigger than what's bugging you. So getting bigger than what's bugging you is actually physically sensing yourself as something bigger than these things that are bugging you and being grounded in that. And that ability to stay bigger than what's bugging you, there are practices around that. And
well, also because the work I do ultimately leads you to the I am that you have been living into, and that is no longer you. Once you've run through the process, you realize, oh, I'm not that, but I can see how all of this, because when we look at all of our assumptions of life and we question them and we start to unravel that none of that is actually the truth about anything that I'm perceiving, anything that I'm seeing, we get to that truth, we start to notice that all of those beliefs, under it all is the identity that is always catalyzed. So when you say the catalyst is out there, I don't care where the catalyst comes from, but what is catalyzed is my identity. And the moment that's catalyzed, I'm going to use all kinds of defenses and lies about myself, though I believe they're true, till I examine them. I have to deconstruct them before I can see that they're false. And you realize, oh, there's that identity. And then all of the beliefs that I've been suppressing that identity. Once it's out, you're like, oh yeah, I'm not good or bad. I'm not right or wrong.
Yeah, no, I mean, that is the beauty of the work that you do that is so powerful, is that, as we've said, like it's a visceral feeling, like you can sense all of the different molecules in your body getting reorganized around this new awareness. There's like a physical experience of this new awareness.
It's worthy to mention in your work and my work, we always remember that this brain is plastic, neuroplasticity. If we're not using it, if we're not looking for the truth, if we're not asking questions, then it starts to rigidify. How can you work with a brain that keeps getting more and more rigid? I'm sure you find that really difficult until we bring up the neuroplasticity and we go, okay, let's question all those beliefs that you have and find the truth. Well, that molecular feeling that you have is actually the plasticity of the system rearranging itself. We've had people come out of class, who were in wheelchairs and walked after. I've had people who've, hated their relationship, wanted divorce, and then they come out the other end and they're madly in love again. I'm not saying in all circumstances, but I've seen, so much evidence of the physiology that responds to the neuroplasticity. And that's all done, as we began this talk, through the questioning that we did as children, because all the work that I do when I'm asking questions is positing a question of childhood. It's like we have a little cup of tea and together, and we're asking different questions about what you believe, and you're just curious. And the person keeps answering, and as long as they're committed to themselves to keep answering, they unravel their own falsehoods. You're not
Yeah. Seen it a million times. And, you know, the question is for the very highly defended person. You know, and I know I've been that highly defended person, so it's not like they're out there somewhere. It's like
I would never say that about you. No. No.
Let's go back to that room, you know, 20 years ago in Hong Kong.
Okay, but that was our, you know, that was our intro talk, and your brain was trying to process. You know,
I don't even know, looking back on it, what was so hard for me that day. I mean, it's just wild to look back at that room and go, God, wow, you were just really struggling with something that was being said. It was like two ships passing in the night. It was completely under the hood, if you will. It was like, I don't even know. It was life-changing now.
Yes, and even you could even see that my agreement with you, right? Remember, you know, when Katherine and I met, the big deal was, you know, I'm introducing the work, and Katherine's like, no, you've got it all wrong. I can tell you how it is. And she did. You did explain it to me, right? And when you explained it to me, I just went, well, yes, you're doing exactly the right thing. But don't you find some people can't get through it? And you're like, yeah, but we just do this or that. But it didn't take you long. You know, once you had that moment, you went, okay. It was just that requirement of seeing something different. And the minute you saw it, you went, I know exactly what this is. You jumped light years. So you tend to focus on defense, but there's also how quickly, you know, after one breakthrough, that's only, you know, my lecture and then a few hours of talking, you get a breakthrough. Your understanding of the work was immediate. It was like skipping the step.
It was, as I've said before, it was the missing link.
Yeah, so
it was the missing link to like all of the work around, you know, interaction, and not as much of the work around interaction.
Because I often think of that moment and how much you must have struggled with people who were defensive, and you had to build up particular techniques and ways of talking to them and explaining things to them to help them out of the defense.
Yes.
So when you arrive in front of someone who says, well, wait a minute, I have another way to do it, you're like, well, I built all this stuff up. It just had to fall down. That's all.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. It was that, and it still is, you know, so powerful, because as I go through my trainings, and everything is around beliefs, of course, whether, you know, whatever side of this communication work we're doing, it's around our belief systems. And
maybe we should also clarify, it's not about beliefs, because everything's a belief, right? I believe this is a computer. So it's a belief. It's the rigid beliefs. It's the ones that we won't, like, okay, today it's a computer, but if it breaks, I might use it as a serving tray.
Yes, exactly.
So, you know, that's flexible. We all get that. It's the belief that rigidifies that we can't get out. So you know, even your example where you say we're highly defensive. No, I don't think so. I don't see you as highly defensive. I just see you as, I'm figuring this out. I'm unraveling it. And then all of a sudden you saw the flexibility and the possible usage of it. But without having the experience, how could you possibly figure out what the usage was if you had already had answers for some of the things that were being introduced? So
it's just, you know, and you know, this is a side story, but it's just that story that you tell about your father who said to you, you know, I'm happy with my beliefs. Stop, you know, like I've got my recipe and here it is, and stop messing around with it, you know?
And how clear, like, it's so honest. Look, I have these beliefs. If you shatter them, I won't know what to do. So just let me have them. And I went, okay, well, I respect it. I respect you.
Yeah.
You don't have a problem with it. You have a problem with breaking them. Okay. And there wasn't even that urge to say, but I could help you. I just went, oh, that's fine.
Yeah, you have a
That's
problem with
great.
breaking your beliefs, but you don't have a problem with having your beliefs because
That's right.
you
So
don't
that's
even see
fine.
them as beliefs.
And it
It's
also,
not, it's not that you even see them as beliefs. You see them as the way it is.
in his case, or
Yes.
no, he knew they were beliefs. That's what made me feel so calm. I was just like, okay, I have this. It's, they weren't triggering him.
Mm,
They didn't have a catalyst around them.
mm.
So why change them if you believe, that a certain actor or actress is a certain way, if you believe that this
Yeah,
is the best way to live? Well, he's not triggered by it. So
yeah.
he's,
It's so interesting. I have like just this sense of how something can happen, right? You can be okay with, I've kind of alluded to this earlier, when I was talking about my mother, like the arrangement of, okay, I even remember my grandmother saying at one stage when I was a little girl, she's the one, sweetheart, because my mother was from the deep South. She's the one, sweetheart. She's the one who's going to take care of you. And so like this spell was cast, and I didn't, I have the memory of hearing that conversation, but little did I know that it would cast me in the role of being the one who would feel like, this is my job. And I think I probably even felt like good about fulfilling my duty unto God and, all the rest of
yeah,
it.
sure.
And so it made it so hard for me to not do my job because I was so wedded to the belief that it was my job. And the problem was within. How do I come to terms with not being completely wedded to this way?
And
Oh,
and we can't forget the words you used, we use all the time in my work, is the spell was cast. We're under a spell. How do you break a spell you're under? This is what we're doing, you're doing, and I'm doing, is breaking those spells. But knowing it's a spell is huge, and we have to wake up, just like Sleeping Beauty is laying there, and the spell is broken by the kiss of the prince. You could interpret that in so many ways, right? The masculine comes in and wakes up the feminine. Why? Well, the feminine is the unconscious and the masculine is the unconscious, and the two come together, so there's an awakening. I mean, it's so beautiful to look at these fairy tales, but there is no kiss that's going to wake me up from the spell, right? So it's beautiful in a fairy tale. We know what needs to be done, but wow, that spell is powerful, and we are under the spell of the mind. So you can say, all right, all of these things occurred, but there is a spell. And to know the moment the spell was given to you, whew,
yeah, no, it's so fun to
powerful.
hear this. But yeah, I can remember when the spell was cast, and then I can look back and see how the spell played out and the ways that the spell brought about the way I chose to live. And, I know even as I say that, I'm like, well, what kind of choosing was really going on there? It was me choosing, it was the spell that was choosing, it was a pattern that was being, that was running the show that, really, when we talk about zombies, I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, was I just a zombie? Was I just
Let's look at
literally?
it instead of going to zombie land, because we could go that way. But if you think of one of the most powerful moments in fairy tales for me is when Sleeping Beauty is born and the parents decide to invite everyone except the witch. No, she's not going to invite the witch into into Sleeping Beauty's life. So there's no darkness, and that's usually what we want to do with our kids. So we don't want to bring any of the dark. We don't want to bring any of the shadow. So you can try and avoid the shadow, but it's going to come. So the witch arrives during the baptismal ceremony and lays the curse and says she will be pricked by a spinning needle. And the king obliterates all spinning wheels all needles from the entire kingdom. Now, can you avoid it? No, the witch comes, finds her in a room, places all these spinning wheels, and there she goes and pricks her finger, and then she's asleep. So you can't, it's such a great story on how you cannot avoid the dark side. You just,
well, you know, it brings to mind, I just want to close this door. It brings to mind that, you know, you'll say often, you know, life is just in session, life is just happening. That, you know, this idea that we can control life, or we can control anything, we can control keeping the witch out of the room, we can control any of this. It's just like a great big ha-ha. You know, we wish we could, that we could keep our children safe from the dark side. And that, you know, I had a conversation with somebody who said, yeah, we don't have TVs in our house. And I said, okay, I mean, that's one idea, you know, keep the witch out. I said, but my experience is that those kids who grow up without the TV in the house, when you control the environment that much, that when they finally get out of your orbit and there's a TV somewhere in the vicinity, that's all they're going to do. They're just going to be stuck right there for a long time trying to fill their, you know, well.
it also reminds me of when I was a kid, the Anglophone community I grew up in, and I was of Greek origin, I mean, Canadian, but Greek origin. And I would go to their houses and there were locks on all these cabinets. And I go, what is that? Why is that locked? I don't understand. Oh, it's the liquor cabinet. And I'm like, but why is it locked? Oh, so we won't get into it. I'm like, why would you want to get into the alcohol? He said, well, because it's forbidden. And I thought, oh, all our alcohol, being Greek, it's everywhere. And of course, we're all, as kids, going, ew, get it away from me. It smells bad. So we didn't want it. But here, these kids were told they can't have it. So, you know, I remember my mother saying, aren't you going to have a party? I said, no, it's really disgusting what happens at these parties. They all start drinking and bringing alcohol. They drink it. They vomit all over the house. They put cigarette butts there. No, I don't want them in our house.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. It was that conversation with this woman about how she just doesn't have TVs in the house. And that, of course, is the phenomenon, is that you take it away and then it becomes the forbidden fruit that everybody now has a completely different relationship to, rather than in my family, the kids could turn the TV on or off whenever they wanted. And as a result of that, it was easy to turn it off because they could turn it back on again.
That's right.
Yeah. So, you know, it was like, oh, okay, I got to go get this stuff done. I'll just go do it. And then later, yeah, you know, I have some free time. I can watch my show. Great. You know,
it's so, you said forbidden fruit, and I just thought, there's Adam and Eve. There is nothing going on. Zero. Hanging out. And then God says, you cannot drink from that tree. Now, why did God put a snake in the Garden of Eden? Why did he do that? Well, something had to catalyze some action.
Yeah.
Something had to catalyze that, like we've been talking about it. There's nothing to do. We just live until we're catalyzed. Then we know there's something to do. So the snake catalyzed Eve. Let's go eat the apple. And now everything starts running in motion.
In a handbasket. Yeah, exactly. Oh my God.
To discover the undiscovered self. Right? To discover all of that, because we don't discover it. We just go around completely oblivious. Some people tell me, well, you know, if we didn't have this conflict, life wouldn't be interesting. And I think, yes, it would. I just don't think that's the reason, is to make life interesting. I really believe that we have to be catalyzed to see what we're ignorant of. And boy, are we ignorant. Right? Here I am 60 years old and still going, wow, there's so much about sexuality I'd still like to understand. There's so much about sensuality. I'm HSP, high sensitive person. Well, just this year, I knew I was HSP, but this year I found way more coping mechanisms that I've put on my senses to dull them when I'm receiving information. And now I'm lifting off these coping mechanisms. I'm like, oh my God, how do I operate this body now? I don't even understand it. I can't cope anymore. I can't shut it down. Okay, so where do we go from there? Well, I'm going to have to learn a whole new way of dealing with my body. So there's been weeks now that I've just been figuring out new ways to deal with life in light of taking off a coping mechanism so that I won't shove down all this sensation, this sensory experience. At the same time, it's really brought this idea of, wow, you know, I'm not just getting old or something that I feel like my sensuality is reduced. I have put tampers on my sensuality. And as the sensuality is rising again, it's like, oh, you know what? I want really nice fabrics on my body. I don't want to wear clothes most of the time. I want to move in different ways. I want my environment to look different. I want to be hugging my man more often during the day, getting naked and just hugging him. I know I'm going off a little bit, but I thought you were going to go censor.
No, it's good because we have an editor and we can edit as much as we want, right? So it's good.
Yeah. So, but I just find it fascinating. Just think about how much we've dulled, because sensual is not sexual. Sensual is our heart. So sensual is reading a book. Sensual is a soft fabric. Sensual is having my bird against my skin. Sensual, I often think, well, am I having a sensual experience? It doesn't have to be 24/7, of course, right? Nothing is that way. But I noticed that I'm oppressing the sensuality, and it causes more and more sort of distortions in my physiology. And the moment I allow that sensuality, it can be the expansion of time, can be sensual. You know, it can be the pause in a day, just that pause. It can be just that moment to take my bird, put him in his little carrier, and go sit outside and look at the snow falling. That's sensual, right? And some people have it more often, but then other people are working, right, and doing things, and we have to figure out ways to allow that to occur. But it doesn't mean we're always doing that, you know. And sexuality in North America, right, is just gone crazy. You know, the exposure of so many body parts with girls. You know, how come men
I saw something the other day, Miley Cyrus on a wrecking ball. Have you seen that?
That's old, yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny. Somebody had mentioned their work with Miley Cyrus, and I'm like, God, I wonder who Miley Cyrus is. And so Pia's like, Mom, really? You don't know who Miley Cyrus is? And so she kind of takes me on this journey of Miley Cyrus's Hannah, whatever, and to where she is now on the wrecking ball. And I was like, wow, that's a transition. Like, she went from like Disney to the wrecking ball.
As though that, you know, Madonna was revolutionary in expression, but they going to the extreme where it's so sexual and there's the loss of the sensuality, that means we're only second chakra. We're not evolving the heart and the soul, which so many people don't know. They just think of the seat of the soul, which is in the liver. That's my experiences of this lifetime. But the soul is in the heart, right? The whatever is animating this experience that has no name. It has no I. I is only me speaking. Right? There's no I in the end. It's just pure consciousness. And we're moving more and more away from it. It's all central nervous system, anxiety. No wonder there's so much anxiety. The sensuality goes, and it's all sex. Sexuality is just the nervous system. It's just the masculine within us. And it gets hyper, we get hyper pulled in that direction, and the sensuality loses focus. You know, this might be a little bit a strange story, but, you know, I watched a documentary on Valentino. And I remember having a lot of conversations with a friend of mine, and she said, I would never spend, you know, $5,000 on a dress. And I'm like, I would. If I had that, she said, even if I had that kind of money. I said, well, if I had that kind of money, I would. To me, it's a work of art. And also I was in the fashion industry as well. And to me, it was so powerful, the sensuality within those garments. And this documentary was of Valentino going public. So it would no longer be Valentino. He was the last one to sell out. And I watched this documentary, and it's crazy. It's just clothing, but I cry.
Yeah.
Because it was sort of the last fall of sensuality. So now we have all this mass-produced stuff, and there isn't that individual, garment that was so beautiful with the beautiful fabrics. Now it's like, okay, let's be shocking, or let's be this. I don't even pay attention to most of the fashion now. It's just,
it's so funny you would bring up Valentino, because there's a friend of mine, many, many years ago, I was at a fundraiser, at one of those classic black tie events, and she wore a red Valentino dress.
I'm thinking of the red dress too.
Oh my God. It literally, I have like that feeling inside of like, it took my breath away. Anybody in the family knows, like the minute we get close to a red anything, I'll be like, oh my God, do you remember when? And they're like, okay, tell me the story one more time. But yes, that is a sense of beauty, right? It's like the majesty of a mountaintop. There is a way to express that.
But you just said it takes my breath away. You get that tingling.
Yes.
That's all the sensuality. And we've even lost it with, now it's throwaway clothing.
Yeah, but it's also the wrecking ball. And the wrecking ball is such a great one to bring up, because you can see that it's wrecking so many things to just focus on that sort of like raw sexuality. To me, it's a reaction. I mean, I look at it and I'm like, okay, there's a reaction going on here. She's been pigeonholed as the good girl. And her response to that, being pigeonholed as the good girl, is to go to the extreme opposite, to say, I am not that. And so now she's identified with that, which means she's still identified with the whole thing.
But how come we were, I'm thinking we're not breaking the boundaries of the energy going so far into the masculine. So if I'm not this good girl, okay, so what kind of energy are you? Oh, I'll just go into the masculine sexuality.
Right.
Well, and then turn around in the same breath. I'm going to use masculine sexuality to break down barriers. And then I'm going to say masculinity is toxic.
Right.
Right? It's like, well,
it's
but you're
insanity.
a part of it, instead of bringing up, to me, it would be totally revolutionary if young people became so sensual, right? That feminine sensuality, the actual seductress, not the prostitute imagery that we're getting, right? But the sensual imagery. And we know, which is so weird, that men respond to sensual in a woman. They don't. They can have that immediate sexual response, but when it comes to having a relationship, being with someone, it's the sensual they're attracted to. I think my partner, there are things I would say and do, and he goes, "Oh, that's really masculine," and I'm like, "Yeah, but you don't like that?" And he goes, "No, I'm not attracted to men. I like you as a woman." And I'm like, well, how does he see this so clearly? He's really taught me what the feminine is. Like my hair, I had it a bit like more wild one day, and I remember one of the people in the group talk said, "Oh, you're a mess today." And I was like, "Oh, so interesting," because my husband turns around and says, "Oh, I love your hair."
Right.
The different perceptions. So for him, like he said, if you never ever cut your hair, ever. So like, yeah, that's not going to happen either. Even if you wanted me to, it's not going to happen. So he loves the hair. He loves the hair all over the place. He loves the messier I can make it. He just loves that natural look. And he's so easygoing about everything. And I thought, well, here's a man who really is teaching me how to be a woman, because I've spent so much time on my own. I've spent so many years, working on my own, and then meeting him, I really had some rigid ideas of what, he would like. And he's just so different. And he said, most men are like me. And I went, oh, so whoever I was, because I often think, people say, but all my friends agree with me. right? I say, yeah, but you tend to attract people like you.
Yeah, like, what does that mean? Exactly.
Exactly. It means nothing. Yeah. Before you speak, Terryann, I'm going to tell you that 10 people agree with me. I'm like, but you know, I'm going to disagree with you, right? You're already setting it up, and I know I'm going to be disagreeing with this. So why tell me this?
Oh my God, I love that. So there's one other thing I want to talk about, but I have to go quickly to the restroom. Hang on, I'm going to pause. So yeah, I mean, but just that whole idea that I think the book I read was called Talking to Strangers by Malcolm Gladwell. And I love Malcolm Gladwell and his research. And this one about talking to strangers was, what are the assumptions that a human being going into talking to a stranger has? And our assumption is that everybody's a good guy. And that assumption is so strong that we have to have a certain level of like cues and clues, if you will, in order for this person to begin to acknowledge that the doubts they're feeling inside are actually telling them something.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we start with that premise, depending how strong it is, that everybody's good. You know, you know me for so many years that one of the biggest struggles I had as an intuitive was I didn't see everyone as good.
I know. I know.
I just didn't see them that way. And, you know, how hard it was for my mom, who saw everyone as good, for me to say, no, this person's terrible. Wait till you see what they're going to do. Or, oh, you see that marriage over there? You wait and see. And they, you know, it's terrible. And she'd say, no, it's a wonderful marriage. It's the best marriage. Find out later, the guy was beating up his wife for like the whole of the marriage. And just these consistent, for me, they were just cues intuitively. Well, I shouldn't say just, because, you know, to be this intuitive, as we know, is a curse and a blessing. But how clearly everyone looks at people and says, you just got to think positively. I don't know how many times people would say to Terryann, don't say those things. I'm like, but it's fact. I have no doubt. Of course, it would take time. And you know, some people would say, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you warn me even more? I'm like, how much more could I warn you? It's on your audio tape. It's you have it recorded. You wrote it down.
You couldn't hear me.
It's not about me.
Yeah, you couldn't hear this. You know, I used to spend a few summers with this guy named Henry Reed, who runs the intuitive side of the Edgar Cayce Institute for Research and Development. And he spoke about the fig and the apocalypse as a stage that we're entering into, where is this whole mindset around, I can control what you have access to knowing about me. I can cover things up and hide them. That we're moving to a stage where we can just know stuff. Whether you want me to know this stuff about you or not, we just know it.
And we've got the example that we're becoming AI. So all that information is out there. So it's even more, people who say, I don't want to be vulnerable. It's like, well, yeah, you are. There are drones everywhere spying on you, on us. You've got your phone, you've got your computer. Sure, you can go hide out, that's fine. But intuitively, there are people who can pick up on things. And, you know, that goes back to what I've always said is vulnerability is my superpower.
Oh, absolutely.
I have nothing to hide. And even if you poke at something in me and I'm triggered, well, I can do work with it because I've been triggered. So I'm not concerned about the trigger. And if you find out something about me that is humiliating and embarrassing, well, time to do my personal
more work.
You know,
around self-acceptance and, you know, what you think about me is none of my business.
What is the Dilbert comic writer? Do you know who Scott Adams?
Yeah.
He says, you know, it's a muscle you need to exercise. Go out there and be humiliated. Do things that are humiliating so you'll begin to build a little bit of a skin. Because if you're, to do something like we're doing right here, it's very easy to be humiliated. You have to have built up a bit of a skin so that, whoever says,
It's so true.
bosses are crooked or.
It's Brene Brown, right? Who talks about, the man in the arena. And if you're not in the arena, putting yourself out there, I don't even want to hear what you have to say about me, because there are so many critics who have something to say. And I've started doing a lot of the putting out, in the sort of world of social media and so forth. And I have noticed, oh, wow, I do get a lot of comments where I just go, wow, I think I'll stop reading people's comments.
Yeah.
Because it can be like you want to wrestle everybody to see through their comment. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to spend all my time
how hard we work with an individual. I over the years of doing social media, just seeing the comments, and the moment you engage without having someone committing to the engagement, you're in big trouble, because they're just going to argue with you.
Absolutely. And defend and prove and all the rest of the things that are getting catalyzed.
Do the work you can, and we're happy to do it with you, and you can also study our work, but no, I'm not going to engage with your comments. That's for people who like to debate. Like, Scott Adams is interesting. He will debate with people, but if he finds a comment that he just goes, that's ridiculous, he just goes block.
Yeah, that's what I've been doing a lot of. I've been turning it over to my social media person saying, can we hide it? Can we get rid of them? I mean, what can we do with this? Like, cannot take my energy and just do that.
Oh, that's a whole other talk we could do about, going out onto social media. I often think that people who can get onto social media and be humiliated, like the humiliating videos, or just getting on and not really having a lot of preparation, etc. You need a good skin. You need a really, really good skin.
It's so true. I mean, I said it a second ago. Marshall Rosenberg used to say, what you think about me is none of my business.
I was just going to say that before. What you think of me is, your opinion of me is none of my business. None at all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It tells me all about you and, all the rest of it, but it certainly doesn't tell me about myself unless I'm in agreement with you. And there's that part of me inside that is saying that about myself already. And now you're saying about me the same thing that I say about me. So there's like a party going on between my inner critic and this outer critic guy that, showed up out of nowhere. And they're just resonating with one another. And that's where, if I'm identified with that inner critic and this guy shows up, it's like an explosion. Because I guess I'm hiding that part of me. And I don't want you to bring that to the surface. So that's why I end up having my explosion, because this is a part that I'm ashamed of, or a part that I'm embarrassed by, that I keep putting, like, the fat part right in the garage. And then something outside comes and starts speaking the same language as that part that I keep trying to hide so desperately. And it's like, now I have to annihilate and get rid of you because you're the problem, because you're actually exposing this part of me. And that's not okay with me. But apparently this little part inside was like doing its little bat wings and drawing this, out to come expose.
And then there's also to be extremely flexible about different things that occur. Yes, we can draw out from the person. If somebody has an opinion of me and I agree with them, likely I'll be triggered. So great, I can go do my work. But there's also the energetic bombardment, if you're looking at social media, that can take your energy. Mm. It can literally dip holes in you. I get treatments pretty much every week to, repair any of those blockage or drains that have occurred in my body mind. So yeah, there's that too. If people who are like me, vulnerable to that kind of thing, it's just the way I was born, yeah, you have to do some work. If you're going to get on there, then you need to do your own personal, not, I'm not talking about breakthrough or belief systems, but, you know, aligning your systems so you haven't picked up someone's hatred or, you know, people are always, if you think something about someone else, in my work, I've always looked at it, yeah, but you're putting a spell on them. But I'm just thinking about this guy. Yeah, but you're changing his behavior because you're constantly thinking of him. And if you're stalking him in your mind, he might start moving further away from you. And you might notice that that happens. You know, a lot of people who think about a guy in their mind over and over again, he becomes further and he moves further and further away. So we do have to notice that. And of course, you're taking practical action. Let's delete these people. Let's get them off, because it's just not healthy. That's practical, right?
Yeah, so that's really like pruning your garden, you know, and getting rid of the weeds so that the flowers can grow, and keeping, you know, that whole metaphor alive, right? So, so what I wanted to zone in on, because I just feel like for me, it's an area of inquiry right now, is this idea of dependence, codependence, and interdependence. And just like really beginning to flesh out the for a lot of us, this is confusing, that there's a normal natural dependency. I can see it with children, where what is developmentally normal dependency changes over time developmentally as they become more and more capable of being pushed out of the nest, if you will, right? And really developing like legs underneath them. And I talk in, you know, the work I do, I talk about learned helplessness as well, where a codependent parent who can't allow a child to fail actually causes the child's failure, because they get in the way of allowing them to grow legs under themselves.
Yes.
So there's, you know, this learned helplessness that comes from an overly involved parent who doesn't trust that the child is going to be able to fly.
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of allowing them to fly, they get, like, you know, they talk about helicopter parenting right now, where a lot of parents are, you know, trying to be sure that little Johnny never falls or hurts himself. I definitely, you know, struggled with that as well, wanting to be sure that the kids were always okay. And noticing that, you know, fortunately I had kids that let me know that I was repeating a pattern. They didn't say these words, but eventually they became also like the support around breaking out of and allowing them to separate and individuate, which has become like my little drum, you know, separation and individuation, and the healthiness of separation and individuation. And then where does the interdependence, a healthy interrelationship, you know, feeling into that territory feels so foreign, because up until now, the relationships have been so much based in these patterns of the codependent and the dependent.
You know, as soon as you say that, I think of nature.
Yeah.
So in nature, somebody said to me, I don't know what we were talking about, they turned around and said, yeah, but you're not part of nature. And I went, what? I am nature. And I thought, wow, how we separate that, because we're living in these cities. But if you just take a few moments and look at, well, I am, no matter how you slice it, dependent on oxygen. I'm going to depend on it. It's something I require. Take it away from me, I'm a dead organism, right? Take it away from a single-celled amoeba, boom, they're dead, right? They're not going to survive. So interdependence, well, we need bees to pollinate the flowers, to, you know, get plants to continue surviving so that we can have oxygen. There we go, our interdependence. Codependence is when I start suffocating the bee, or I start pushing the bee to do something that it doesn't want to do, right? Oftentimes I see people who, you know, I have a little bird and I can see all my projections onto him. he doesn't have guilt. We're born in guilt. Otherwise we'd all be psychopaths and sociopaths running around. We have guilt. Well, it seems to me, I don't know about any other reason why we would have guilt.
Right.
Or we just be reptiles then, because our reptilian brain is mostly what we do in a day.
So, you know, just to plug in here, what I'm hearing you say is that there's a healthy role for guilt. It's a mechanism to create correction in behavior, and it's to be like, there's a distinction between guilt and shame, and shaming ourselves for having the guilt or shaming ourselves for having the mistake.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to put it in, you know, it's really hard because existential guilt is everywhere and it's become pathologized. But why would nature and our evolution bring us to a point where we feel guilty so quickly? A lot of people say we were trained to feel guilty. And I've done exercises with people to see, were you trained? Go back and go, no, I felt that guilt before. And you knew you didn't want to kill your next door neighbor or take the dog and strangle it. You know, there's a big difference between a child who does strangle a dog or a cat. They're very young, like pre 4 years old. That's a huge difference. They're born with something that is not functioning properly. But when I read The Sociopath Next Door, you know, she said one great way to differentiate a normal, everyday, average person versus a sociopath, when they see a briefcase hanging out and it's unattended, we would say, should I take it? Shouldn't I take it?
Should I give it the lost and found? Should I look for the guy who owns it?
The sociopath says, do I take that briefcase today or not? So it's clear that there's no...
They're going to take it. It's just today.
They're going to take it, or is that the one that I want to take today? You know, or do I even care about it, or whatever it is? Yeah. So to me, that would be the only reason so far that in my look at the body mind of a human, well, that would be the only reason for so far that I've discovered, evolutionarily speaking, that we would be born in guilt, that we would have guilt come up. So, but from there on, other than hurting other people, stealing, killing, you know, just running around going, well, I don't like you, I'll just slap you in the head and take your house. You know, I think we would do that. We would have chaos without any practical guilt. Like that's something we should do. But, you know, very clearly it becomes pathologized rather quickly, right? That's clear. Where were we going with this? I lost my...
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and rewind. But if I just go back to, you know, like the salient issue around dependency, codependency,
right, that's
interdependence.
Right?
Yeah.
So guilt becomes pathologized and we become codependent. Right? That's one way of looking at it. So you talk about conditioning. That's a huge part of it, right? I'm conditioned. There's going to be punishment for when I'm not doing something that I should do. Then there's, I'm disappointed in you that you didn't get an A today. You know, that brings me to tears. I had a class just recently and we were working through disappointment. And for me, you know, one of the breakdowns that I've come to with disappointment, just one of them, is it is an expectation that is not met. So people were coming up with different definitions. And this one gal just looked and said, so when my husband keeps saying to my son, I'm disappointed in you, that's not good. And I'm like, well, what do you think? How do you feel if I say I'm disappointed in you? And she went, yeah, no, that feels horrible. But it never dawned on her that saying I'm disappointed in you was at all a manipulation, asking you to take care of my feelings, right? If I'm disappointed in you, well, what do you have to do with me? But now I've created a codependency.
Yeah, and that's the same thing, you know, praise and disappointment are two sides of the same coin. And so when I say you've done something that's worthy of my praise, it's the same thing as you've done something that's worthy of my disappointment. And so a child is stuck between these two manipulations. One of them is like the carrot, one's the stick. So the carrot is I give you the praise, the stick is I give you I'm disappointed. And and we're stuck between the world of how do I meet your expectations so that I'm neither disappointing and now I'm praiseworthy, but they're two sides of the same coin where eventually I begin to feel like I'm the dog with the biscuit. And I get the treat or I don't get the treat. Again, the external locus of causality based on whether I meet or don't meet your criteria for treat giving.
And also, to also look at the child might ask a question. What does my grade have to do with you feeling? Because for me, disappointment is sadness and unmet expectations. What does my grade have to do with your emotions? Maybe that's something you need to look at within yourself.
Yeah, so back to this dependence, codependence, interdependence in an interdependent world where, as you said, we are dependent on everything around us well, not everything, but there are things within our ecosystem that we must depend on for our ability to continue to be here.
And what about this new interesting piece that's come up? We now have to have things that we didn't have to before, which is the cell phone.
So these are I put that in the world of the wants as opposed to the needs, but it's.
I don't think I put it in the world of a need now.
So, yeah, I mean.
Can you operate a business? Can you live now with a cell phone? It's become one of the needs. If I didn't have a cell phone or a computer, you'd be at a loss, right? You could live without a TV. That's easy. Did that for 20, 30 years, no TV. But cell phone, it makes it really hard. It's no longer I want. It's really interesting to see that. I'm not going to say 100%, but my feeling for operating in this world, communicating with people, how we live now it's part of a need. It's an extension of ourselves now.
Yeah, I can see your point for sure, with regard to how dependent we've become on it for just facilitating our day-to-day lives. It's become
I won't even say it's just, dependent. Okay. Yeah, we need it. Yeah. I can't see how would I function business-wise without it. How would we make this video? How would we communicate with everyone? Are we going to go back to snail mail? Or am I going to go door to door? And now with COVID, it's even more critical that we have these cell phones because you can't even talk to anyone.
Yeah, I mean, the only distinction, we're just playing a word game. The distinction is simply around universal needs. And, we've got a long list of universal needs, right? Whether it's belonging needs or whether it's needs with regard to, level 1, 2, 3, and 4, what have you. And I'm not really sure the way I meet my needs is with these various things like a cell phone. And so it becomes a mechanism to meet these underlying needs for connection or belonging or, what have you. And so that's where I just.
More in terms of oxygen.
Right. So yeah, in order to keep breathing in the world and connecting, I need to use this to facilitate that. And without
delineating.
it. Yeah. So it's
you can see it's a need. It's a
distinction.
No, it's not a luxury. It's not, it can be a codependency for some people, sure. But even then, yeah, not really.
I mean, I've been doing some work with a guy who's got gaming addictions in his background, and he and I've been talking about just how gaming addiction is in of itself really just information about someone. It is it's a coping mechanism. So if you're struggling in school, or you're struggling with connection, or you're struggling with this, that, and the other thing, a lot of these kids turn towards something that they can feel successful, and they can feel, there's actually a community out there of gamers, and they form their, connection for community through the gaming process. and some of them lose themselves in the game. You know, it brings up The Matrix, where, you know, just that's such an incredible film around this awakening that we've been talking about. And, you know, red pill, blue pill, and going back to sleep again. And I think it's the red pill that you wake up with.
Yes, I think so.
I think so too. And
it's called being red pilled.
Is it called being red pilled? Yes, something happens. And for some, you know, period of time, this guy in the Matrix is like, I just want to go back to not knowing this other, like somehow my head popped above the cloud and I don't want to be up here anymore. I want to go back and fall asleep again, because it seems like it's easier to be sleepwalking under that spell than to be aware that I'm sleepwalking under a spell. Now I know I'm under a spell, but I may not be free of the spell. I just happen to know I'm under one.
Oh, he wanted to forget everything as well.
Yeah.
He told them, no, make me forget everything. I just want to taste a good steak again. And he's eating his steak, you know?
Yeah, I just want to go back to the simplicity of, you know, feeling like things were so much more explainable. And there wasn't this other, like, I didn't even know that I was stuck in my mind. I didn't know that this was all about me and my mind. Yeah, like there's no out there, a friend of mine likes to say. What, there's no out there? What do you mean there's no out there? There's something out there. I know there's something out there. What, it's all a projection?
There's no out there.
There's something out there, Terryann.
What is that? I'm not very good at explaining quantum physics, but there's this whole idea of collapsing, right? So as long as we are looking at an object, it's being observed. This explains how energy works as well. But the observation of this table means the molecules collapse and you get a physical object. So if I'm not looking at the object behind me, it basically disappears. So I mean that.
So now we're back to interrelationship and interconnection and creation. And, you know, what was the name of that film that you're referring to? And Further Down the Rabbit Hole is the part that I can remember. So what the bleep do we know?
Right.
What the bleep do we know in Further Down the Rabbit Hole? I haven't watched that for so many years, but it was so phenomenal to see that, yes, the observer and my presence either collapses the wave or, you know, doesn't collapse the wave. And what is seen is so individual.
And yet collective, because we tend to see the same thing.
Yes. And then there's this collective consciousness that is in agreement about what is. And then when, for whatever reason, somebody pops their head above the collective perception of what is, we have an issue with all of it, because it's like we're over there going, but no, it's not like that. It's not like that. No. And people are looking at you like,
it goes to all those old expressions. Seeing is believing. You have to prove it. You know, when I think back to the 80s and 90s, and I started doing energy work and talking about belief systems, and people would come in with all these really weird ideas. And I think, no, have you studied for a moment what you're saying? Have you looked at it? And, you know, and I would see things, you know, in the body, and, you know, medical professionals would say, no, that doesn't exist, or that's not correct, or no, that's impossible. And now, you know, very short time later, that's 1980 to 2000, let's say, that period of time. And then from 2000 to 2021, what we've discovered, the information out there, and everything I saw way back then, it's all being validated. So I can't say what I see needs proof, because the proof may come later when we're ready to see it, right? So many energy workers, we've all in so many ways come together and agreed. but it's a handful.
Mm.
And finally, the evidence comes up afterward.
Mm.
It's like,
yeah, breaking through the mind, breaking through the mindset. So, you know, it's like mindset shifts and the tools to be able to create the openness that there can be a different sense of something. And there can be, you know, what do they say a miracle is? A miracle is a shift in perception.
Yeah, maybe. Or miracle, yes. I was just thinking of magic. You know, how often magic occurs and we just have to explain it away and we don't realize it's how magical things are. It's magical that it's snowing. It's magical that you and I are on here, that I haven't been able to hug you now for years, but get to have this time with you. It's magic.
Yeah, it's all magic. You look back on, you know, that time where it was Angie Terryann who was bringing this woman to Hong Kong to do this thing, and oh, Katherine, you have to go, and la la la. And then Nikides shows up in the room because she's in a course, and I must have mentioned it one day. I don't even remember mentioning it. And I'm like, wow, Nikides here? How did she get here? I hardly knew Nikides then.
Well, she had taken the course. We did 2 classes, and there were only 2 students.
Yeah, April and Nikides.
April and Nikides.
Right.
And Nikides lost her mind. She's like, you have no idea who should be here. Why isn't everybody here for this work? This work is amazing. And then, of course, she came to the class and she was awestruck because everyone was like, what is this woman talking about? Yet the day before, Nikides was just, I don't know why she was just in tune with it. She just got it. And then gradually it became a little bit of an addiction for all of us, right?
For all of us, yeah. But I mean, I look at that moment in time where it all just happens. You talk about everything is unfolding and life is just happening. And, you know, I guess, you know, part of the wonder in life is like, why do we end up in the company of these particular people at this particular moment, which leads to these particular, you know, situations? And yeah, I have no idea. Right? I have no idea. All I know is that it sure did make the last, God, I don't know, 15 years maybe? So much fun.
Yeah. Fun.
So really much fun. Oh my God, the snot flying around the room, the tears, the, you know, smoking our brains out. I mean, the pain that was being released, and you know, oh my gosh.
The crying and the crying and
the crying and the snot flying and the, you know, oh my heavens.
A room full of drama.
Oh, great.
Good.
Oh man. Well, this has been so much fun, and I know it's just the beginning of more, but I adore you, and I just am so excited that we get to do this together. Yummy, yummy. Oh, my heart is full.
So juicy. That was too much fun.
Too much fun. Oh, mwah. All right, sweetie, I'll send you a recording, and then we'll decide how we're going to use this thing.
Well, you'll cut that. Stop the recording.
Well, no, it doesn't matter. My editor, of course, is going to need to.
Oh, okay. So you're going to edit everything too? Okay, cool.
Well, no, we can just, you and I can take a look and decide, yeah, you know, do we want to make this into, I mean, we've been on for like 2 hours or maybe 2.5. So it's too much. So what we'll need to do is, I do have a wonderful guy who edits videos for me.
Wonderful.
So we'll have him, I basically just say from this minute to this minute, we're going to make that a segment. And then, so we might have 5 segments of something right here, and we can make it, you know, some kind of, let's do a YouTube channel or something.
Yeah, let's just put it up.
Yeah. And if we break it into 5 or something episodes, then or maybe even more, we just decide if we want 20-minute segments or where the natural breaks are.
Okay, great. And we could throw them up on Instagram and wherever else.
Yes, exactly.
Put them on the websites. Get it out there. Get our.
Yes, we can just start throwing it out there to create interest in our work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And just see what blossoms from it. It could be a blast.
Totally. All right.
Love you. Kiss
Love you, sweetie. Okay? What's that?
Kiss PF for me.
I sure will. All right.
I love you. Baby.
Bye.
Thanks for
Mwah.
doing that part. I
What's
was like,
that?
I was asking Angela, can you edit this? Can you? She said, I'll figure it out. And now you've got somebody who's going
I've
to
got somebody who edits for me. Yeah.
Okay, great. And then Angela does some work for me.
And
too.
Angela can also edit. Like, there may be different things, but it's not that hard, I don't think. People who know what they're doing just go and do it in 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's dumbos like me who's like,
And me, who have to go to other people and say, could you
I've
do this?
tried to snip audios and tried to snip all these things, and I'm like, I don't understand. And I get my stepson to do it.
Oh, you got plenty of resources.
And he does it in 2 seconds.
All right. Mwah. Love, love, love you, girl. Say hi to mom.
Okay.